hope you've all had a good break, and I'm Sally Watson. I'll be facilitating this evening's session. Just some housekeeping first. The usual stuff, please keep yourself on mute unless you're invited to speak. Please make full use of the chat, and you're welcome to pose questions there for speakers if you don't want to raise your hand, and we'll do our best to keep an eye on that. And if you do have a question that you want to ask in person, you're very welcome to, but put your hand up. But please, can you keep questions or comments down to, a minute at the most, just to make sure that we've got enough time for everyone to join the discussion who wants to. For people who are new to Ideas for Beers, welcome. And what is Ideas for Beers? Well, it's a forum for anyone interested in active travel, whether you're a campaigner, a practitioner, academic, journalist, politician, or just an interested person. And we'd love to hear from you if you'd like to present an idea. So you are welcome to get in touch with us, and we'll put the email and the website in the chat. And you can catch up with all the sessions on the website as well. And if you haven't done already, I'm going to say this every week, please sign up via Eventbrite on the email. You only will have to do that once ever in your life, and you will get sent, when we send the new lot of the next link out for the next few months, which will be after July, you will automatically get that because you'll join our mailing list. So even if you're getting links at the minute, you still need to do that. So tonight we've got Bob Davis, as usual, to give us our weekly news update. Then we have Mark Strong, who's going to talk about bike parking, and Rod King, who's going to talk about the SpeedCam Anywhere speeding app. So over to you, Bob.
Okie doke, thanks, Sally. And here we go. Transport in the time of COVID, update 26th of April. And actually it's about the last 2 weeks since we last met. And here we go. If you want specific links or slides, you can email me, send me information. Don't forget to go to our new website address here. We're also on Twitter. I don't know, we may have to review that policy, bearing in mind who's the new owner, but anyway, we are at the moment. So I'm keeping on doing sides of Kiev because it is important, and you see these people on bikes and walking around, and it's an indication of resilience, and for me, it's a sign of our solidarity with the people involved. And here's another new one. This is someone going through the wreckage, using a bike to get about, which a lot of people seem to have been doing. And you can get the sticker here from that website. Okay, here's something from the latest IPCC report. Household consumption options. Choosing low carbon options such as car-free living, etc., plant-based diets, etc., can reduce an individual's carbon footprint by up to that amount. So there's a nice reference for you. This is something that I picked up from Giulio Maccioli, who's always worth following. And it's about the way in which people buy, or rather lease cars. And it's talking about these systems, personal contract plans, or PCPs, which are cheap leasing deals, helping to explain rocketing car sales in Britain despite flat or falling household incomes. This is from 2017, but I think it still applies now. Anyway, he retweeted that. So interesting story to take a look at. Now, here's something I picked up from a guy called Will Petty, and it's walking frequency versus income. And it's in London, and a percentage of adults who walk 5 times a week or more are way up here at this end of the graphic. And you can see there's a sort of link with income. In the poor borough, Barking and Dagenham, median annual income below 27 grand, and only about 28% of adults are walking 5 times a week or more. Kensington, Chelsea and Westminster, it's between 45 and 50%. And there the median income is around 40 grand. Now, of course, you can say, these are the inner London boroughs, these are the outer London boroughs. And that's true. And you do get the poorer outer suburbs as opposed to the wealthier inner London areas. But it's interesting to take a look at that. And it's for London, but it's, you know, just something to think about. It's not just density. There's a link which would suggest that people who are wealthier like spending their money on living somewhere where you don't have to have a car. Just worth thinking about. I put this up last time we met from the Minister April 1st Traffic Management Act 2004 update, and talking about the kind of forceful language that the minister is still using in terms of the need to reallocate road space. And, you know, I am personally worried that if or when Johnson goes, that the whole thrust towards active travel may be muted. So, you know, it's very important for us to hold them to what people in government are doing and have been stating as official government policy. And since we last met, so it was published 13th of April, the Active Travel Local Authority Toolkit. Now, I don't know if there's anything very new inside it, but that is your go-to reference, the Active Travel Local Authority Toolkit, published on the 13th of April.
Well, can I just say one thing on that?
Sorry, who's speaking?
Adam Reynolds.
Yes.
I had a look at it. I actually think the critical thing that's in there is there's the key deliverables from an LC WIP. So there are 3 key deliverables that haven't previously been explicitly stated. It actually means that the West of England Combined Authority LC WIP delivers none of those and has to be rewritten. But it does mean, but the critical thing is that we need to provide a strategic cycle network for the whole of your region. And that is something I think a lot of local authorities haven't been doing. And to have that explicitly stated there is really quite powerful. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Adam. I'll put that in next week. And don't forget, these slides are going to be already up on the website, and we have a YouTube which will go up in about in a few days' time. Thanks, Adam. Again, put this up 2 weeks ago. Carlton Reid's book on the 1930 zero protected cycleways will be, I think, coming out fairly soon if it hasn't already. Go to his website to find out more about that. Yeah, report on car clubs. Again from London, a report commissioned by Como, done by Steer, estimated that 650,000 additional households in the capital could rely on a car club to meet their needs. So some facts and figures there on car clubs. Right, local elections in England coming up. I'm assuming a lot of you have already got stuck in, but the national organisations and local organisations involved do go to that page, Cycling UK, if you haven't already. They've got the various demands to be making of your candidates. Living Streets have got the same. Again, go to their website, go to that link. And in London, the Climate Safe Streets campaign is involved. So presumably you're aware of those. You should be questioning your candidates on hustings and so on. Right, your victim blaming for tonight. Bedfordshire Police, the usual stuff. And what was nice was it was pulled after 4 days. I mean, you know, I've been looking at this a victim blaming for all my life. And what's so nice now on Twitter or presumably on other social media is that there are big pylons when people come up with this sort of stuff. Another one was from Merseyside. Making yourself visible to other road users maximizes their ability to see you react to your presence there. You know, have some sort of head torch when you're walking. I mean, we're lucky we didn't see the reflective dog leads, which used to be quite big a few years ago. Keep Wirral safe. Instruction to cyclists to always use cycle lanes if they're there. That's actually been pulled from a highway code. They still put it. And pedestrians to look multiple times before crossing. What does that mean? How many times are you supposed to look before crossing? Multiple times. Dreadful. We're all very bad. And, you know, someone did part of the pylon, reported to them on their Facebook page saying, is there anything wrong with this page? And they said, what were you doing? I was reading your road safety advice. What went wrong? Your road safety advice. So that was nice to see. This is something I missed when it first came out, but it came up in a Twitter thread. You should see Disability and Accessibility Statistics England 2020. There'll be one, I think, from last year, 2021. But the figure from 2020 was driving license holding by disability. For without disability amongst adults, it's about running about 80%, still about 20% without driving licenses amongst people with no disability. And with people with disabilities, it's about 55, 58, something like that. Here's the reading list, some new ones. Always worthwhile looking at George Monbiot, that was interesting. Living Streets have got 2 million quid for a school outreach project. I don't know how effective that will be, but a bit of news there. Now, bike parking in London, a lot of stuff has come up. A lot of fuss about how it can be cheaper to park a car than park a bike. Look at that article there. Keele University is going to be doing some pretty thorough research on the use of dash cams and something on the facts and figures for different kinds of car, the life cycle assessment. It's quite thorough work on the difference between electric and diesel and petrol. What else? Yes, tomorrow, transport appraisal and carbon. That's tomorrow if you haven't signed up for it. Rod's going to be talking about this potential game changer. There's a YouTube on that business about how a lot of Londoners haven't got anywhere to park a bike. This applies to all urban areas, I would say, and non-urban areas, perhaps. Now, it's a very important thing. A survey quoted in The Guardian saying the Tories could lose 1.3 million voters if the net zero target is ditched. So, you know, if your local Tory candidate comes round, just tell them that, you know, you are thinking of voting for them, but you don't want them to ditch the net zero target. And other candidates as well, of course. I don't know if Mark's got any news about Active Travel Fund allocations. Mark, do you want to say anything about that?
Well, a little bird tells me that it's basically to do with Purdah.
Oh, right.
So that Brian's team, can we announce that Brian?
I'm going to talk about Brian. No,
Sorry.
No. I'm going to talk about Brian. Yeah.
Active Travel England people said basically they spent so long looking at it that it basically got into the start for Purdah, and then they couldn't announce anything, despite two councils actually announcing it when they shouldn't have done. So the councils have been told what they've got. They just can't. They're not allowed to tell you.
I see. So that'll happen after the elections. Yep.
Sometime, yeah.
Okay, doke. Thanks, Mark. In the UK, this is in Edinburgh, Leith Walk. I don't know if you've seen that picture, and someone from aboard saying, sort of making comments about how there are all these swinging abouts. Yeah, Leith Walk. Don't know if anybody wants to say anything more about that from Scotland. Edinburgh had Pedal on Parliament, so they had a lot of people for that. In the Leicester Mercury News is a nice picture of this new walking and cycling bridge going in. And other bad stuff there. This is in Surrey, Hawley. 800k Active Travel Fund Tranche 2 spent on this kind of stuff. Will Active Travel England step in and say, no, you're not supposed to do that? And this is from Kent. Thanks to Gary Outram, got in touch with me. I saw barriers to be removed over, or calling for them to be removed over lack of disability access. This kind of stuff still keeps on coming up. And South Tyneside again, giveaways at every one of these junctions. What's going to happen as Active Travel England gets stuck in? And Sustrans, the route between Gravely and Letchworth, how's that going to work out for people on adapted bicycles for people with disabilities, or cargo bikes or trikes or whatever else? Okay, a lot of stuff in the elections has been coming up about LTNs. The Birmingham Kings Heath LTN is to be made permanent, but the local Conservatives have been saying that it's putting lives at risk. They're going to remove it, and so on. That's one bit from Birmingham. Other stuff's been coming up elsewhere, no doubt. In London, Lambeth, on the 5th of April, I think I mentioned this last time, they upheld a High Court decision to reject a legal challenge to the Lambeth LTNs. It's in there. Corporation of London have got a pedestrian priority area. I've been hearing about this for ages, with maximum speed 15 miles an hour. I understand it's not the same as a normal 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's more advisory than enforceable, but nevertheless, it's up there. There's been some concern. The taxi drivers are lobbying to be allowed to use Bank Junction, which the removal of motor vehicular traffic from Bank Junction was regarded as a big step forward for active travel. Okay, here again, This Is Awkward people talking about how much it costs to rent a bike hangar space in Islington, preparing to annual parking permits. Posters have been put up in Islington. Hammersmith and Fulham, the local council leader we heard from Leo a few weeks ago is promising to scrap parking fees of some kinds ahead of the election, so appealing to the motorist vote, unfortunately. There's a report on the cycle hangars from Fair City, talked about, and there's a thing about average parking permit cost by mode. Electric cars at 29, cars start 50, cycle hangars 58. So some concerns there. A lot of stuff happening on cycle hangars. Lambeth have said, we will deliver over 5,000 secure cycle storage places in Lambeth, 5 times more than the last 4 years. We will continue our program to roll out cycle storages across our estates. There's been some stuff about the pedestrianisation of Aldwych. Councillor John Burke, or I don't think he's councillor now, is he? I don't know. He's been very fulsome in praise of the plan to pedestrianise Aldwych, but if you read people like Linus Rees, and I think Simon Monk, if he's here, has got something to say about it, It's a lot more dubious than that. It doesn't have good access for people using bicycles, and it's quite expensive, and it's a short amount of space. So is it that good? Just because John Burke is normally right on the button, thinks it's good, it isn't necessarily. Right, now this is very important. A poll done by Centre for London, and article in The Guardian by John Elledge talking about how there's all the fuss about LTNs, and people have been getting at him when he talked about LTNs, and we've seen all the stuff in the past, all the aggravation. But when it actually comes up to it, what are the biggest priorities for how you will vote in these upcoming elections? Restrictions on cars or schemes promoting more cycling are right down here at about 12%, just above none of the above. So way before all the other questions. That's percentage who have placed it in their top 3. So it's the old thing that, yes, there is a significant minority of people who make an enormous fuss, who say it's like living in North Korea or the Holocaust or Gaza or whatever. But when it comes down to it, overall, a lot of people, or majority of people, aren't that troubled by LTNs and cycle lanes. So, I mean, that's in London, but still relevant to you in urban areas. There's a nice picture of Pedal on Parliament. And finally, Active Travel have a new head of inspection, who is this guy, who's just been cycling through a fountain in Munich. So, the founder of Ideas with Beers. If you come to Ideas with Beers, you can end up having an important post pushing for active travel. So well done, Brian. And there he is. And lots of congratulations and best of luck to you, Brian. And that's it. Anything else? Any comments?
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, and we're all delighted about Brian's news. I'm sure everybody will join us in wanting to congratulate him on that. I can see a couple of hands up. I think Mark was first and then Simon. Do you want to go for it, Mark?
Yeah, just a quick thing about that, the income and walking comparison. That's from the Active Lives survey, which is Sport England's study, which I was talking about with Adam Bronkhorst, who's on here somewhere yesterday. And there's huge amounts of data and about how frequently people do and whether they walk for or cycle for leisure or for other purposes. So it could be done if somebody wanted to spend the time. It could be done nationally. The data's there for income levels. The data's there for cycling and walking levels. So if somebody wanted to do every council in the country to look at whether that worked, that correlation was there somewhere else, it's there. I could do it, but I haven't got time. So that's a challenge to somebody.
Thanks, Mark. Simon?
Yeah, I was just going to say very quickly, on Bank Junction, I think there's 2 points to make very quickly. One is, and I think this is generally true for a lot of England and probably Scotland and Wales as well, is one of the issues we're seeing with Bank Junction is that there's a whole massive change in who the councillors are in the city. So the city had their elections slightly early because they are a very weird semi-democratic kind of thing anyway, but they had their elections early, and basically there's been a massive shift over in loads of councillors and aldermen retiring. And that means that the taxi driving industry has seized an opportunity to brief the new folks to say, this is why you need taxis back at Bank Junction. It's going to be brilliant, etc. So that's the first point to make, is watch out for the fact that in your area, you're about to probably have loads and loads of changeover of councillors and politicians. And some of them may not be on brief so much or be fully skilled up on active travel or whatever. So there's a piece of work going to be done after the elections to make sure they all know what they're talking talking about. Second point on Bank is that businesses, by all accounts, are very pro taxis returning there. Now, obviously, the businesses around Bank Junction are a particular type of business with a particular type of clientele, but talking to a lot of folks in London, there's a real piece of work still to do about getting businesses to understand why, you know, taxi access everywhere to the door isn't necessarily the best thing on the planet, why having loads of people walking everywhere is a really good thing, etc. Very briefly on Aldwych, I was just going to say the scheme is brilliant for pedestrians. It's like a massive leap forward for Westminster to pedestrianise a huge chunk of the Strand. It's a great scheme. The problem, as ever, with Westminster is that what they do for cycling is basically expect you to route round the Aldwych curve with no facilities whatsoever, loads of parking, so car doors straight into you, or they've made the pedestrianised area kind of shared space. So there's a pinch point right at the crossing. You go straight onto a shared use crossing, straight into a massive pedestrian pinch point with loads of people walking. So that's the choice they've given cyclists, is weave through pedestrians or weave through traffic over to you. So that's the downside of the scheme, but the upside is massive leap forward for Westminster to do this. You know, this is a major chunk of real estate in central London. It's going to be fantastically better than it was, you know.
Thanks, Simon. And have we got any other questions or comments for Bob? No, I'm just going to say one thing, which is, I'm going to wave this at you. The weekend of the 14th and 15th of May is International Kiddical Mass. And that's the flyer that we have for the Kiddical Mass in Newcastle, but they're happening all over the country. Check out if there's to see if there's one in your area. I know that they're happening here, North Tyneside, Inverness, I think Reading, Bath, Derby, possibly London, a whole range of places. If you want to do one, then there's a Kiddical Mass Facebook that you're welcome to join and find out a bit more information about how to start one. We did have a Ideas with Beers talk, so you can also look at our website. And I'll mention that again next week, just as a reminder. Right, I think we're ready for our first speaker now. Rod King from the campaign 20s Plenty for Us is going to talk to us about the new Speed Cam Anywhere app. Rod, are you there? I see you on the...
Yep, I'm here. Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen and pick the right one. It's that one. Okay.
Hang on, we can't see anything.
You can't see? No, I've got to share it. Yeah, there we are.
There you go.
Always do that. Can you see that properly now? Right.
Fantastic, yeah.
Okay, good. Public gathering on submission of speed non-compliance evidence. Yeah, sounds a bit complicated, but it's really about how communities can work with the police to combat road criminality using Speed Cam Anywhere. And it's really about how you can use one of these to gather evidence of a speeding vehicle. So, look, in most communities, one of the key concerns of residents is the speed of motor vehicles. And we all know it's not only sometimes the cause of incidents, but it's almost always the reason why the people involved in an incident don't have time or space to prevent it becoming a crash. And it increases the severity of casualties. It also suppresses active travel, increases emissions, and it rarely reduces journey times. Now, the police know that reduced limits increase the call for enforcement resources. And this often causes conflict with residents because the police cannot or will not enforce 20 mile-an-hour limits, which are really chosen to enhance community life. Now, some forces do enforce 20 mile-an-hour limits. One of the best is Avon and Somerset, which in 2021 issued nearly 24,000 notices of intended prosecution on their 20 mile-an-hour roads, which are really brilliant. But many do not, and some even discourage the setting of wide area 20 mile-an-hour limits. Now, the key issue, which you come back to them, is one of resources needed for enforcement, and that's equipment, it's frontline officers, and it's back office staff as well. Now, Speed Cam Anywhere is a key to resolving all of those issues and marshalling the desire and resources of the public to break that bottleneck on speed enforcement. A little bit like dash cams and head cam usage. Now, you probably have noticed that 20 mile an hour is gradually becoming the norm. It's now 28 million people in the UK live in local or national authorities where 20 mile an hour is or is being set at the norm. And it's over half the largest 40 urban authorities. It's all inner London boroughs. It's all of Wales. It's really global best practice. There's typically a 20 to 40% reduction in casualties, so that's good. And now we're getting results which are showing even on faster roads, we're getting a decent reduction in speed, even without making any changes to the design of the road. But without police enforcement, the police look like they're failing communities. And non-compliers do so with impunity. They just say, it's the 20 mile an hour limit. I don't have to comply with that because I won't get caught. Communities are less safe, less walkable, and less secure. Now, in most police areas, you can upload videos from dash cams or head cams as evidence of road crime. That's for dangerous driving, close passing, traffic light offences. But why not use that for speeding as well? So it's not included in this due to the time and resources which there are to analyse a video to establish the speed of a vehicle beyond doubt. It is being done that police do take dash cam and CCTV and actually can work out the speed of vehicles. But they've got to do on-the-ground measurements, right, in order to verify that speed. And they use that to have evidence of dangerous or careless driving. But it takes so many resources that they tend to use it only where there's been a fatality. But Speed Cam Anywhere takes a different approach to that, to upload video evidence and reporting by members of the public. It works with any modern smartphone, no special equipment required. It's not critically dependent upon the angle of approach of a vehicle. Those who have studied this will know about the cosine effect, which means that you never get an accurate, you always get under reading of speed, but this will work at approximately 45 degrees oncoming or a departing vehicle. So that's quite good. It means you can be quite covert in taking the video. It creates a video snap of an offence together with a report and witness statement showing speed, time, registration, location, and speed limit together with a template for a witness statement. It could allow police to issue a Section 59 ASBO warning or potentially, subject to clarification and approval, a notice of intended prosecution for speeding. It could also allow a local authority to assess a civil fine if bylaws exist. How does it do it? Well, the observer sees a car approaching and activates video capture on it. It's actually been buffering 1 second of video capture before you press the button, and it takes the 1 second afterwards. Right. That 2 second video is uploaded into the cloud, right? Where there it's analyzed to gain the speed, which then is downloaded back to the mobile phone, right, and can be uploaded. Let's look at how that happens in detail, because I think once you see this, you'll realize the potential of the device, and you'll understand its accuracy. It receives the video, then it does an ANPR lookup from the number plate in the DVLA database and gets the make, model, and year of the vehicle. From there, it does a separate lookup and it identifies the wheelbase of the vehicle. So at that point, that becomes the yardstick for measuring the speed. What it then does, it uses artificial intelligence to identify those frames in the video, and remember all of those frames are time-stamped, where the wheel centers, front and rear, pass a virtual line on the road. At that point, you've got the time difference, which gives you the time element of the distance over time calculation in order to get the speed. So it uses that. It looks up the location from the GPS and gets the limit, right, and a map of where that is located at the moment. It can then send back to the phone a report saying what the speed was and how it was exceeding the speed limit. So, and this is important, the phone itself does not measure the speed. There's no calculations in this phone which are measuring the speed. It's very unlike one of these, which is a radar device, which has got to send something out, and then the device calculate the speed. The phone is completely passive in this process. So we get a report for upload, which is something like this. And you can see it's got the map, it's got the speed limit, it's got a picture of the car, it would have a picture of the number plate of the car. And then it's got the snap, the snips or the frames from that video, which will give you the timestamp, right? And this virtual line where the front and the rear, first of all, the front wheel, and then the rear wheel goes over that line, all done by artificial intelligence. And all of that information is kept in the video with those timestamps, right, for subsequent checking if the speed is challenged. So that's what it produces from the wheelbase, and it says whether it's speeding. And then that can be uploaded to a dash cam. Key things about it, it requires no frontline staff. But of course, it does enable any police officer, if they've got a smartphone and they're in a situation where they can see speeding vehicles, to actually get their smartphone out and actually take some recordings. The public can capture videos discreetly and safely, right? And actually quite easily. It's not requiring any special equipment. The portals already exist for uploading videos and witness statements. There's zero back office analysis required. Indeed, we can see that there are already mechanisms whereby you can use this with automated back office processes because it's all digital. The police control the filtering. They control the thresholds at which they want to actually do a sanction, whether that's a Section 59 or a notice of intended prosecution. It enables police forces to fully endorse community enhancing 20-mile-an-hour limits. And there's a societal thing here, because when you're driving along the road, any pedestrian could be a Speed Cam Anywhere pedestrian. Any pedestrian could be someone who's going to actually register your speed with just a 2-second clip as you go past them. And that again develops this community-wide compliance. It really does develop this enforcement potentially anytime, any place. And that is, in essence, Speed Cam Anywhere. We've been working with the developers for about 9 months now, giving suggestions and so on. The police response is a little bit not invented here, I think. And certainly from the establishment in the Home Office. How dare somebody come up with this new way of doing things? So we've seen a bit of a reaction from the main players in that. But we've also got interest from some police forces who are doing tests, right, to see just how accurate it is. And from what we can do, we think it's got a high degree of accuracy in that range of 20 miles an hour to 50 miles an hour, which is predominantly what we're talking about in urban situations. We've got some information on our website under press releases and also in a blog which explains exactly how it works. The Android version is available now. There were a few teething problems in the first release, which were to do to logins, and that was unfortunate because it gave a few bad reviews, but it does work well, and it provides great information. Will the police start using it for fully for notices of intended prosecution and speeding? Possibly, but we've got to go through a few hoops on that in terms of approving the logic which there is in the AI algorithms and so on to do this. But at the end of the day, all that those algorithms do is replicate what has already been done by forensic analysts manually in order to take video footage and get speed from that. So that's a quick overview of SpeedCam Anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. That was fantastic. And I can see lots of interest in the chat there. Tim, I can see you've got your hand up. Do you want to go first and ask a question?
Yeah, I was trying. Thank you very much for that, Rod. I've got an iPhone and I saw all the comments in the chat that said I can't download it, so I'll wait for that to happen. I was busy cycling along a contraflow cycle lane when I ran into a Jeep, Mercedes Jeep, parked eating their toasties outside a cafe running their engine. I took a photo and complained. They had a very funny number plate, which turned out to be quite rude. But when I went onto the, check your MOT site and put that number plate in, the Mercedes Jeep turned out to be a Golf 1.6. So cloned plates, nicked plates, and so on is something that concerns me about this.
Well, I guess that's something which is going to affect any ANPR system. So it's not unique to this. So, and I think you'll probably find about 98% of the people you find speeding are not on clone plates. So, yeah, you'll miss that 2%, but it could be used to increasingly, right, catch those 98% who actually at the moment aren't caught at all, then it'll be pretty good.
Thanks. Bob, I can see you've got your hand up as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of stuff about third-party reporting in general, which we've had before with PC Mark Hodson talking about it. I tend to kind of zone out after a while because there's a lot of techie stuff about how easy it is to download. The overall third-party reporting thing is, as I understand it, something that Chief Superintendent Andy Cox, who's also one of our favorites, has been working on to try and get done nationally. This is specifically about the phone app being used for speeding specifically. One thing that I saw on social media is that Road Safety Support, who are one of the sort of fairly establishment organizations, were saying, oh, well, this all has to wait approval from the Home Office. Now, where are we on that, Rod? Is that happening, or is that the case, or is it not? Or because there also seems to be a problem here that some people are saying, I can't download it, I can download it. So just on that, if you could tell us.
Okay, situation. As I said, some of the first reviews weren't very good because of a problem with the registration and login. Those were all resolved. It's only Android. The situation is that Apple took a little bit longer, right, to approve it. They've released it for testing at the moment. So that's what we'll be doing with some test users on it with Apple. But the Android version is there. They've increased some of the documentation to help people to use it at best, right? So that's good. With regard to road safety support, yeah, I mean, this is typical of an app which is a game changer. Someone looks at it and says, well, instead of trying to measure the distance between two ramp posts and see if that's on the video and calculate the speed, hey, you know, the wheelbase of a vehicle stays exactly the same and the manufacturers do it to within a couple of millimeters tolerance. Why can't we use that for our yardstick? And so it's just the sort of innovative, completely sort of off the radar type of solution to a problem which comes up. And yeah, the people who have developed this have done well on that, and they've solved that problem, which I've been looking at for ages, which is actually how do you use a normal mobile phone to do that. And remember that there are millions go into research and development on this in order to control that video and all the workings around that. So this phone has probably had more spent on it than any, certainly any a speed cam, right, that you're aware of. And remember as well, no one asks for the Home Office type approval for a dash cam, right?
Yeah.
And the other point is that if you look at Section 59 offences, they don't need anything other than the reasonable grounds of a uniformed police officer. That's the basis on which you can issue a Section 59 offence where a vehicle has been used in a manner which is causing alarm, distress, and annoyance, which contravenes Section 3 of the Road Traffic Act 1988. So there are grounds, but the police, the establishment, is not used to actually someone coming along and say, hey, you know, smartphone, we can provide you with evidence of speeding, which is pretty damn accurate. And we're talking about less than, you know, plus and minus 1 mile an hour in error. So it is pretty good, right? And it overcomes some of those problems about the cosine angle as well. But there is a bit of shock and horror and surprise.
So this is a kind of establishment road safety response saying, oh, we don't know what's happening and so on. But in fact, you don't need Home Office approval. That's what I just wanted to check up with you. Not
for Section 59 offences.
Yeah.
Right, of careless and inconsiderate driving. All you need is a uniformed police officer saying that they have grounds to know that someone was committing that offence. There is no requirement, right, for anything more than that. If you want to actually penalise someone for the act of speeding at a certain speed, that is different. You need a Home Office type approved device, right? But if you go via the Section 59 route, then the actual offence is not speeding, right? It's careless and inconsiderate driving, and that is the point. And that precedent has already been set, where the speed of a vehicle, I think, which has been identified from CCTV, has been used, right, to show that was considerate or dangerous, inconsiderate or dangerous driving.
So two things here. First of all, would it not be an idea to look at cases once they have been successful prosecutions under Section 3 RTA in 1988 and to say, this has been done with this app, you can do that?
Of course it will be. And I assure you, as soon as we get some Section 59 notices issued, then we will be publicising that, right?
Great stuff, Rod. Now, what I want to say, just to finish off here, is I had a meeting with the great Mayor Hillman, a friend of mine for some years, who you know about. He's now in his 90s and he's sort of officially retired, but he's still going on. He wrote a book with Stephen Plowden 3 decades ago about speeding, and he said, mobile phone technology has now changed everything. That's what he said in a meeting with me a couple of weeks ago. So Mayor's on your side.
Yeah.
You should feel happy about that.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we've got a couple of more questions and then we'll move on to our next speaker. In fact, one of them has his hands up. So Adam,
I've felt Mayor is on my side for decades.
Adam, you got your hand up. You got a question for Rod?
Mark was there first.
See,
Yes, I do. My phone, my internet connection's unstable. But anyway, I'll try and ask a question. The credits that they're using for it, effectively to get the AI to work, you can use 1 credit to get a rough estimation. And then, because I've got the app on my phone, and then you can use 100 credits, which is basically £1.50 to try and get somebody prosecuted for the speeding offence.
No,
So
that's incorrect. It's 10 units.
is it 10 units? Sorry.
It's 10 units for the Pro, and that's because in order to do the DVLA lookup, in order to get the wheelbase, then there is a charge for that.
Okay, fair enough. All right, maybe I read it wrong then. But is this one of those things that can be done cheaper, or is there a deal that can be done there to kind of make this a free thing? Because it seems like a really powerful solution.
Yeah, I mean, there are two things. First of all, the processing costs anyway, because of the amount of processing which is done in the cloud. It's not only the processing in the smartphone, but it's also in the cloud processing, which there is. So there's a cost for that. We're looking at the pricing algorithms. We're looking at the idea of basic and pro. I would say that you use basic if what you're doing is really just to try and go out and measure some speeds. I'm going to try and measure that. I'm going to measure 100 vehicles and see what the speeds of them are. So that's for some measurement purposes. You're going to use the pro version if you're looking at it reporting purposes, right? So again, there we'd say don't waste it on don't waste the pro, if you like, charge where you're not going to be reporting, because that's where you need the accuracy. But we are looking at the way we present that to the public a little bit more, with some possible tuning of that as well. Right.
Thanks. Mark, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm do Community Speedwatch, and one of the problems with Community Speedwatch is we have to write all the number plates down manually, and often we write them down wrong before we even get into the clone plate issue. Could we have a situation, we keep thinking it would be great to have a camera on our speed gun. So could you have a holder where you put your smartphone on top of your camera, on top of the speed gun, and did both at the same time? Are you talking to Community Speedwatch about how those two things might work together?
No reason, right? But if you're doing that, you just take a picture with the camera. If all you need is the.
No, we're not allowed. Apparently, the police tell us we're not allowed to take a photo of the number plate.
Okay.
We have to, according to our police liaison, we have to note it down manually at the time. We can't look it up on the DVLA website legally, apparently.
Okay.
Something weird.
In which case, they may well feel that you taking a series of photos, which actually your phone builds into a video, is not allowed either. But there's nothing to stop you using this with a, at the same time as you're doing speed cam anywhere. But so yeah, I don't know how that would equate with or being classed as taking a photo or no, right? But we have had interest from people involved with SpeedCam Anywhere, right? So sorry, with Community Speedwatch. So this is a moving situation because it's a establishment consensus thing. It's gradually, people getting through. Well, actually, dang me, it is pretty accurate, right? And yeah, it does seem to work. So we've gone from a situation where perhaps a month ago it won't work, to actually say, well, hey, there's merit in it. So I think it's a case of watch this space. We'll see how it happens. Again, we'll see some consideration of where it could be useful, where it's not so useful, right, and the resourcing implications, etc.
Right, thanks. And I think we'll all be watching this closely, and I've no doubt that there'll be much more comes out of it and watching it develop. And many people trying it out. If you've got questions for Rod still and you want to put in the chat, and if Rod's here for a little bit longer, I'm sure he can try to answer them, but I know he has to get off soon. So sorry.
Yeah, I do have to get off, so if you could put them in the chat, and then if you can email me the chat, right, yeah, then I'll do it. I'm on holiday for tomorrow until Monday, so maybe a little bit of delay. Right, but yeah, I'd like to follow up with any questions and provide answers on an ongoing basis as well. So thanks very much for allowing me to present.
No, thanks very much. And so I can hand over to Mark Strong now, who's going to talk to us about bike parking. Mark, do you want to share your screen?
Thanks. Just check you can. Why is it not working? Yes, can you see that?
Yeah, that's great.
Right, thanks. I don't know how long I've got left. I'll maybe have to speed through some of these. So I'm talking about bike parking and the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's going to be less text and more visually based, apart from a couple of slides at the start. And this is the problem that we're trying to avoid. Why isn't it progressing slides? There we go. So the problem isn't actually about bike parking. The problem is about bike theft. This is from National Police. We were talking about police earlier. National Police Chiefs Council report from 2017, which looked at cycle theft. And it's a big problem. If you had somebody looking after your bike, if you had somebody watching it or some deterrent, then we wouldn't need any cycle parking. We talked about Amsterdam earlier. Maybe that's the answer. But it is a big deterrent. It's the second biggest deterrent to cycling after safety fear. And 24%, so a quarter of people who have a cycle stolen, stop riding. So we've got to generate every time somebody has a bike nicked, we've got to generate a quarter of a new cyclist from somewhere else. So that's a big deterrent. Go and look at the report, and this is a report by Laura Laker, a news piece by Laura Laker about this report, and the full document is in there. So what do we need to do? Well, there are lots and lots of rubbish bike parking out there. This is one in Hackney of all places. And I'm trying to recommend that we just keep it simple. That's keep it simple, stupid. That's what KISS means as an acronym. Keep it simple to Sheffield stands. That's the U-shaped stands, TfL stands. Keep it on the highway, not on the pavement. And bike hangers are the new kids on the block, and they're doing really well. Nothing that we don't want, the right thing in the wrong place, the wrong thing in the right place, and lots of rubbish. And I've got this little symbology here, which has been done up for people who are colorblind, so you can see the tick and the cross as well. And that will just go through some of the slides and some of the photos of some of the awful things that we've seen. So it's not so brilliant these days, it's a bit tight, but here I am in Brighton, got bike racks, well spaced, nice reflective guides for people who have visual impairments, a tapping rail for blind people. You can't quite see them. This is outside Brighton Hove Albion, similar sort of idea under a rack. This is in Hackney. Again, it's okay, it's well spaced, but if you were partially sighted, you could well easily walk into those racks. Getting onto the better things and the worst things, this is new in Trinity College Dublin. This is cycle parking for adapted cycles, disabled people, and it's really quite good, and we're hoping to get some of that at Cambridge University. We did some work on that. Anything, though, that needs a sign saying cycle parking starts getting into the realm of bad parking. If you need to explain what it is, then it isn't going to work. And some of you may have known about David Byrne from Talking Heads. I won't do any Talking Heads singing today, but that he was a judge in a competition to have cycle parking in New York. Now, if you want cycle parking, that's great. If you want public art, that's great. But trying to put the two things together doesn't always work. I've got another example of his later. Just do what it says, form not function, function not form, sorry, and it should really work. And what it looks like is secondary. It shouldn't look terrible, but it should look adequate. We've just done a whole cycle parking audit of Southend and Thurrock, which are not the most propitious areas for cycling. Some of you may have ventured out and tried to get to Lakeside Thurrock in the big IKEA, the first IKEA in the UK. This is the entire cycle parking for that entire IKEA site. At least it's sheltered, but that's about all you can say for it. What's the point of having a shelter if you have a hole in the top of it? And what's the point of having racks if they're extremely rusty and on a concrete plinth next to an abandoned sofa? There are some good stuff in Southend and Thurrock, but these are just some of the nightmares that we saw around. And then you get into the sort of realms of the sort of Dutch style. I suppose this is Reading Station, where the racks are color coded, so you know whether you've left your bike in the area with a sort of yellowish sort of sticker across it, or a blue sticker, green sticker. But there still isn't enough space. And then this is Brighton Police Station, which I tweeted about and got a response from the police commissioner almost immediately afterwards, and a meeting to go to help the police with their inquiries about bike parking last week, which was really good. If the police are putting in wheel benders, that's not much help for you. And I mentioned bike parking and cycle hangers, and we talked about, I think Bob mentioned it earlier with the stuff about Islington. This is Brighton Road in Hackney, which has more cycle hangers than Brighton in Brighton. But then you get onto some of the better ideas. This is Liverpool South Parkway, where you cycle to the station, and the last thing you meet before you enter the station is the cycle parking. And you have a choice of paid for secure parking or free, slightly less secure, but nearer the station entrance parking. And you couldn't get really nearer than that, and it's well protected. Somewhere in London, I think this is down in off Tooley Street somewhere. Again, the only thing wrong with this is they've wasted money on the tapping rails in the middle. You don't need tapping rails in the centre one, because the idea is the visual impaired person wouldn't wander in, but it's worth doing if you're going to order it. And then outside Liverpool Street Station, where they've been quite innovative in their way of trying to use redundant road space. The problem is that I've parked a bike there, and I don't know if anyone else has done this, but you forget that you're actually not by the side of the road. You park your bike and you walk backwards into the running carriageway of the road. So it's fine from the cycle parking point of view, but really from the pedestrian access after you've parked, it's not so great. There's quite a lot of types of parking that people start using that are innovative, quote unquote. Anything that involves pushing your bike up a hill. This is in Brighton. This is the Royal Sussex County Hospital. This is Sheffield Hospital. This is the cycle parking for visitors. I suppose they don't assume that anyone's going to be cycling to the hospital, as it's up an extremely fiendish hill. But the cycle parking for staff's not bad, but the visitor parking is atrocious. You've got the weird posts. This is in Westminster again. Weird posts with holes in it, which are not great for visually impaired people. And this is Gatwick's cycle parking. Apparently that's for security reasons, and it's off the ground, so you could stick a mirror on a stick to see if there isn't a bomb in there. So some of the things you have to worry about. I won't get onto the story about special branch and bike bombs now. The Scottish contingent here will know what that is, but the rest of you might not. This is the cycle parking at the Scottish Parliament, which when you get the right angle turns into this. So, but if you, how you're supposed to know that that's cycle parking, well, I've got no idea. I think there is actually proper cycle parking as well. So people-friendly cycle parking, it needs to have enough space for demand, enough space for accommodating different types of cycle, and enough good quality and supporting the cycle. So this is the one cycle hangar in Brighton. We're soon to get quite a lot more. And again, have some together, have free parking next to the paid-for parking. School in Stoke Newington, why not have it on the carriageway? Why are you obstructing the footway for those people who are walking or pushing buggies? And this is Camden's approach. Camden was really innovative in about 10, 15 years ago and invented its own new type of stand, which this is the Camden M stand, the M in Camden. And the idea is that the vertical element of the cycle rack is actually more secure than the horizontal, so why not double the amount? These haven't really caught on, I think, as much as Camden and Broxap, who sponsored the whole thing, would have hoped, but they're still being used, especially in Camden, but not just other places. But inconvenient, poor design cycle parking will just be ignored. This is Churchill Square in Brighton, where people have just attached it to the railings of the steps, tree pits. If you haven't got decent parking, people will just, rightly, attach it to something. Again, Oxford's got to have an Oxford and a Cambridge photo, Oxford and Cambridge ideas. Oxford Station a bit like Reading, colour-coded, but just a mass. And it works if you can remember where your bike is. So the 6 criteria, they're normally the 6 criteria for cycle route design, but you can apply those to cycle parking as well. So safety, or in this case, security of bike parking. You've got to have something to lock to that's secure. This is, I think, Harrow on the Hill Station. But again, Sheffield, stainless steel Sheffield, so if you're visually impaired, you won't see them very well. Hackney on the carriageway, Underwood Street, so it goes where you want it to be. And in Brixton, cycle hoop type design, they're all fine until this van driver opens the door and smashes into your bike. They need to be accessible and comfortable. This is in Dulwich, where you've got 2 rows at 90 degrees of Sheffield racks. So if you start parking your bikes on these, you can't get to those, and vice versa. This one in Reading is even more difficult to get to. Again, if they were all used, the ones in the middle would be completely inaccessible. It really should be a cross on that one. And Brighton, what Brighton, Oxford, Hackney, and I think a couple of other places are doing of putting the cycle parking on the carriageway with a build out to stop them being hit, really seems to be the way forward. And there was a report recently, I think the inclusivity report, which basically said all cycle parking should be on carriageway. All scooter parking on electricity chargers, everything should be on carriageway. I don't think they should all be. There are some cases where you've got wide footways, but in general, that's what you should do. And just the point about visual impairments, one trick is to make your photos black and white. So this is what stainless steel rags on a grey background. This has just gone in Brighton. This is what it looks like to normally sighted people. If you've got a tunnel vision or some sort of a visual impairment, that's what it starts looking like. Obviously, if you're completely blind, you don't see anything, but it becomes much harder to detect against a grey background. You've got grey on grey, and as your vision gets worse, it'll get harder and harder to detect. That's why you have the contrasting colours. Well located, so you need them near the entrance, not away in the car park next to a lift shaft. The best one, this is, I had Brighton earlier, this is Southampton's football ground where the National Cycle Route runs through the car park of the stadium. I suppose the only problem is on a match day, it's really hard to get in and out of here, but it's right next to the main stand. And this is a tram, one of the tram stops down, I think in Wimbledon, where the tram is over here. So why not have the parking near the tram stop? Why have it the other side of the stop? And then you get into the well-designed and attractiveness, and the number of proprietary weird designs is only exceeded by the willingness of people to buy them. This was a thing called the Gripper, which really took off in the late 90s. If you're going to have a bike parking with moving parts, don't put it in somewhere like Eastbourne, which has salty sea air, because then the moving parts rust up and you can't use it. Another David Byrne one. Okay, it's nice art, but you start getting protruding bits for people to fall on. And this is in Southend, and I think it's supposed to be family-friendly cycle parking by having a family of bike racks. I think that's presumably the idea. But and it presumably is good for kids' bikes and bigger bikes. But again, it's not really clear what it's for. And finally, when you've got to have, this is the adaptability in a cycle route design, but when you've got to have routes parking, you've got to have it managed, well managed. Greening your bike racks is all very well, but greening your bikes that are parked on it, it's not so great. Again, Brighton and other councils do a notice system to get rid of abandoned bikes, but you've got to also look after your bike racks. This is in Brockwell Park. It's obviously been hit at the time. And again, I said about sea air in Southend, you've got to have it, protected against what's there on the sea and the rust. And you've got to have space for expansion. So just a final couple, I mentioned about Brighton and the pedal cycling bays, and here's the cycle hoop, cycle bike hanger next to a parklet in Hackney. This is really where the future is going to be. That's just two more. This is what you really don't want to do if you don't want to put your cycle parking somewhere where you have to swim to get your bike before and after. And finally, I have seen Graham on the call here. So here he is, puzzling out what on earth this is in Oxford. Graham Smith. There isn't anything to attach your bike to, so quite why they need a notice telling you not to attach it to is an interesting one. Maybe that's Oxford. Maybe there's something special local going on. So there's a run through about the good, the bad, and the mostly ugly. And if you keep it simple and keep it straightforward and ask people who know what they're doing, then really it should be very straightforward. But I'm continually astounded by how easy it is for some people to get what should be easy wrong. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. That was a really great run through. Sort of following on from that last point, asking people who know what they do, how do you find somebody who knows how to do it? And also, I just wondered whether, because our local authority and a number of other local authorities are signed up to park that bike so that businesses and what have you can get free bike parking. Sometimes they have to pay for installation. I don't know how widespread that is. Is there a sort of gap there that, when new developments obviously in bike parking and the expertise that go with that is one thing, but somebody who just wants to put a couple of hoops out the front, whether that should be something to be encouraged, or do you think that it should be the local authority making space in the carriageway?
I think there's a difference between developer-led parking, certainly, and well, there's three types of parking, I suppose. There's local authority implemented parking, there's developer-funded or business-funded parking retrospectively, and then there's parking in new developments. And the three are they all have slightly different. They should all be the same, But I think you should be, they should be asking the same standards of the of developers as you would yourself. And what we've found in Brighton is the developers are putting in worse stuff than what the council is putting in, because it's a different section of the council and they're not talking to each other. So, councils have streetscape guidance as the London Cycle Design Standards. Councils in London have streetscape design. You should be basically requiring, developers to stick to the same requirements as the council. It should be that straightforward. And some councils have got what's called an SPD, special. I can't remember what it stands for now. I should remember, but anyway, it's a planning document, a supplementary planning document, which sets out standards. And you can put in that what you consider to be sufficiently good standards, which then goes to a developer. Cambridge, we did one for Cambridge. It's 10 years old now, but they're still using it, which just shows that the market is there. And if you set out what is good beforehand, then there shouldn't be any excuse for getting it wrong. Park That Bike's really good because it helps small businesses who want to put things in source the bike rack. Because if you're a small business and you just want to put something in, you haven't got the time to work out which manufacturer and find a builder to put them in. So it works really well for that sort of thing. But not everywhere does it.
No, that's right. Thanks. Bob, before I bring you in to ask your question, I'm just going to pick up a few things from the chat. Steve says, Mark, sorry he's had to go. Surely we have to make any bike parking beautiful as well as functional. It's practically a moral duty to counter the aesthetic disaster that cars have made of urban centres.
I hear what he's saying. I hold with William Morris, who said, have nothing in your home that you neither feel to be beautiful or know to be useful. So there's a feeling versus knowing element there. I had an argument with Ian Hingley of Urban Movement. We mentioned Urban Movement earlier. Ian put some bike parking in Brighton, which he said, it has to look good when there isn't a bike attached to it. And I said, but the point is to attach a bike to it. So if it doesn't work when you attach a bike to it, it doesn't matter how good it looks when there isn't a bike attached to it. And he said, but it's got to look good. And we went round in circles. So I'm going to disagree with Steve and say the most important thing is that it works. It shouldn't look horrible, but it's not a piece of art. It's a functional unit that should be contributing to working well. Curbs, well, obviously some people love what curbs look like, but they're not all prettified. They're a thing that works. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Not pretty, but useless. So I've got another here from Clive. Any tips on persuading commercial organisations to do the right thing with parking? We are struggling with Tesco.
Yes, I know about that one. It's very difficult. I mean, the bigger organisations, you should go through you need to go through their corporate teams, and sometimes Tesco's have their own brand cycle parking, bizarrely. That's the only supermarket that actually have a trapezoidal bike rack, which is actually pretty useless compared to Sheffield racks, but they've invented their own design. So give them marks for that, and they tend to do them at their own stores, but the smaller ones are often franchised and not as enthusiastic. You can throw all the stats you like at them, that that the retail spend goes up and so on, but if they're determined not to do it, it's very difficult. I mean, the only time you can really persuade people is when they're part of the planning process.
Then next we've got Wilf. What's the view on tapered Sheffield stands with one end full height crossbar at an angle to the lower end to cater for smaller bikes?
I think we're describing the trapezoidal ones I mentioned, that are like the Tesco's ones. And the problem is if you put your bike the wrong way, a full-size bike the wrong way, they fall down. So if you put in ones with a lower tapping rail, then you can attach a lock to the lower tapping rail. But remember that the study that's like Design Against Crime team at Central St Martin's did, University Arts London it's now called, about 10 years ago, they did a bike-off study, and I mentioned the Camden stands. It's the vertical parts of the racks that are the most secure, not the horizontal parts. So if you're going to attach a U-lock to it, you should attach it wherever possible to the verticals, because it just makes it harder for a thief. Nothing is thief-proof. Go back to what I said. It's all about not getting your bike nicked. It's not about, the units are there for a purpose. They're not there just to stand there. They're there to stop your bike getting nicked. So in a sense, the horizontal bit doesn't matter. The horizontal bit is to stop your bike falling over, not to, ideally wouldn't be to attach it to.
Yeah. Right, so Bob, you had a question?
Yeah.
And then Ruth.
Okay, so speaking from my experience as being a local authority transport planner over the decades and running various programs to install cycle stands, one of the things may seem a bit arcane, but it's important because materials are important, and rust is an issue Mark brought in his very comprehensive and concise presentation, which is very good and which you should look at on YouTube. I started using stainless steel, and then the visually impaired people pointed out some of the issues. Now, there are two types of stainless steel. There's brushed and polished. And they actually said the one which troubled them most was the polished, because this could hurt the eyes of some people with visual impairment. So they preferred brushed. And we went through various kind of contortions. And one of the things was to actually cover them with a kind of yellow ochre sort of paint, which I think looked pretty gruesome. And anyway, we got away from that. But I mean, the point, I mean, stainless steel does have this really big advantage of not rusting, of being, you know, maybe you can have the kind of tapping bar, the lower horizontal, or maybe you can have, if it's a question of coloring, you can have bands on the stainless steel. But you know, tell me again about the whole VI and stainless steel, brushed steel, polished steel. Tell me about that.
Well, it's simply contrast. Most roadscapes are grey. Tarmac is grey, and footways are grey, essentially. So if you have something that's greyish on a greyish background, it's hard to distinguish. It's contrast. So you're right. That's why black on grey is, you know, if you imagine people having black and white vision, that's why it works. But if you had black contrasting bands on a stainless steel, then yes, that would probably do the business. They wouldn't be as visually noticeable, possibly because they wouldn't be. You couldn't have reflective black, I think. So they would be as noticeable, possibly at night to sighted people. But you know, that might work. It all depends on the lighting. I mean, ideally, don't put them in the way of where people are walking. That's the first thing. And this is back to this.
Sure, there's this whole thing, and about how you don't have to see them if you're not going to be walking into them, and you certainly don't need tapping horizontals on each one in a row. But so, are you saying that you wouldn't want stainless steel of either brushed or polished anywhere?
No, I'm saying that it's not on a footway. So the ones I showed in Brighton, which went in as part of a development, they've been pulled out because the footway was built wrong. And who knows whether they're going to go back. They were put right on the footway, right in the desire line of where people are walking, with no consideration of any of that. So that's wrong. But like the ones behind me, you know, on the build outs, actually, they don't technically, you know, it's unlikely you're going to be wandering along there with your guide dog into the carriageway because you've got the curb and the footways unobstructed. So actually, in that sort of situation, you could probably get away with stainless steel.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Mark.
Ruth, you got a question?
Good question. You didn't show the tulip and the two-tier one, which I see in Holland all the time, which is really successful when you've got a big basket on the front of the bike. So you can lift it above the level of the other one with the big basket on the front of the bike.
I'll stick to the two-tier. I did mention at the beginning. I think I showed one slide of it. Two tiers work very well in dense areas, but they're actually really, you know, the upper level is really difficult for people to use. And the best actual design I've seen is, I don't like using the lower level because I whack my head on them.
No. That's sorry to interrupt you. I don't mean.
Oh, you don't mean two tiers.
It's like a tulip, and you put your bike on the bottom level, and then the upper level is literally that much higher.
No, sorry, you're not talking about the rail station type two-tier ones.
No, tulip, shaped like a sort of tulip.
No, I know what you mean. They have really poor. Well, the UK evidence is they have really poor theft things, and the bikes fall over. Remember that they are kickstands, so maybe we should be arguing about bikes with kickstands. But Sheffield racks are much cheaper to make. They're one piece of metal bent into a U, put into two holes in the ground, and they are basically just one piece of easy to make metal.
Well, they use them outside Albert Heijn, and it means you can get two bikes very close together with big baskets on the front.
Yeah,
I
but we
won't take
remember
any more
we're now talking about 1.2 meter spacing for bike racks in LCD. In LTM 120, we're talking about 1.2 meter ideal, 1.1 meter minimum. That's gone up. It used to be 800 to 1,000, and you see them all around at 600 meter spacings in other places, the older spacings, where you can't fit bikes. Interestingly, by the way, the two-tier racks I'm talking about, the ones that use at station, most places in the world, they have them at 300 meter spacings, apart from Germany, where they have them at 500 millimeter spacings. And apparently, I am told that's because Germans are generally bigger and find it difficult to fit between the spacing of the racks. I'm part German, so I can say that, I suppose.
Thank you very much. We've covered a lot of ground there with cycle parking. I'm glad to hear the space is getting wider. I really struggle to get all of my bikes in and out of bike parking if somebody else has already got in there.
Well, they're not getting wide. They're not getting wider, as in the ones that are already in are not being.
No, well, no, but in future, hopefully, it improves. So just before I hand over to Ruth for the last word, big thanks to both of our speakers again, and just to say that next week we have Linus Brown from the Institute of Transport Studies in Leeds, who's going to talk about the post-COVID transport impact report. And we have Sarah from CamCycle, who's going to talk about the Cambridge cargo bike scheme. So looking forward to that. So over to you, Ruth, for the last word.
Thank you. I've mentioned They Work For You site, probably, which I think is very, very useful for non-professional people, for campaigners like me. And the question was asked of Baroness Vera of Norbiton about what the breakdown of the money that's been spent of £1 billion that's meant to be spent on cycling and walking. And there are two tables. One is for 29-20, 2021, and then 21-22. I've not managed to look at them yet. But in the last week, I cycled 275 miles in 1 week. And that's not to aggrandize myself. However, I went from Chiswick to Maidenhead to Taplow to Windsor to Rochester to, I can't think where, Box Hill, Dorking, all these places. I couldn't see anywhere that any money had been spent in the last year. And I've done most of those journeys over the last few years anyway. So I just think for non-professionals, campaigners like me or anybody, really has to keep asking their own politicians and councillors, where has the money been spent and what's it being spent on? Because from my number of miles, which is huge, I just cannot see it. That's my last word. Please get in there and ask. Thank you. See you next week.
Bye, Ruth. Keep
Bye,
the
everyone.
tulips going.
Thanks, everyone.